Now that we've finished installing React, what we can actually do is get coding in it, the fun part. We're going to use Bootstrap for styling because I'm pretty familiar with Bootstrap. I'm not a big CSS guy. I use it when I use it when I need to. Right tools for the right jobs. Here we're trying to just prototype out our to-do application, so I really feel that Bootstrap is a good tool for that. It's relatively simple instead of having to write all the CSS by hand, but let's get into it. So to start off, we're going to just clean out a lot of these files because we don't really need them. So we're going to delete logo, index.css, app.test, app.css. We're going to delete all of those. I'm not going to save delete. So after you delete all of those, you got to delete the references. So go into app.css or app.js, delete the 2 imports at the top, and then go to index.js and delete the CSS import from that. So we can run npm run start, which we set up earlier, and that will run our development environment. And as you can see, we have another issue. Logo is not defined on app.js. Interesting. But it's not here. Here's our issue. So there it is. Now we have welcome to React. So after we do that, we're going to look up the Bootstrap CDN. So I'm just gonna Google Bootstrap 4 CDN. Click the first one, and what do you know? We have a quick start. We just want the style sheet. We don't need the scripts right now. We might in the future. We might not. Depends on how I feel like going. So we're going to go into our index.html, which is under your public folder in your client folder, and you're going to just throw that bad boy in the head. So there you go. Now we have Bootstrap, and so now if we go look at our React, it looks a little different now. As you can see with the back, what this looks like, it just all the fonts are a little different, the colors are a little different. Bootstrap does that by default, which just makes our site look a lot better. So now that we have this, we're going to do some house cleaning, make sure that we have some stuff looking good. So we're going to add to our source. We're going to add something called component. We're going to add a component folder, and we're going to throw our app.js in there. So whenever you do that, WebStorm does this for me automatically, but your IDE or your text editor might not do this for you. You're going to need to make sure that your import statement is correct. So mine changed it automatically, as you might have noticed. And if you don't, you're not too observant, I guess. But you need to make sure to change this to component app after you move it into the component folder. So we're going to close the Bootstrap. As you can see, it still loads up just fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some simple components, render blank text out on the screen, and then we're actually going to make our first GET request and render those out on the screen. And then we're going to be done for this video. So what we're going to do, we don't need anything about our server open. We don't need this HTML open. We don't need anything about our server open again. So what we've got, we don't need this index file open either. Right now we just need app.js. So we're going to delete everything inside app.js. So we're going to want a header, right? Just kind of a simple nav bar, nothing too complicated. So what we're going to do is we're just going to create a simple component here. We're going to right click new JavaScript file, and I'm going to name mine top nav. Now I like the naming convention of Pascal casing everything, top nav, capital T, capital N. That's my way of doing it. You can do it however you'd like. So we're going to import React from React, and then we're going to do const top nav. Now, if you've never done any React before, I will happily explain everything that I'm going over at the end. And if you've never seen any of the syntax before, it's fine. I will go over all of it. So the difference between an arrow function and a regular function, other than the obvious syntax versus, this is a function. This is also a function. So this function and this function, the only difference between the two is the context. So this has a different this. I know that's kind of confusing. The fat arrow function is what they're called. So this is called a fat arrow function. The fat arrow functions have a different this dot than a regular function does. You will most likely see in all of React, and mostly people really enjoy these fat arrow functions. So you're going to see them a lot, and I'm going to use them quite often. So what we've done is we've just imported React from React. Any React component that you make, you're going to need to make sure to import React from React. We've got a constant of top nav, and it's just a function. And right now it doesn't do anything. And we just exported default top nav. So nothing too special here. So we are going to return open parens. Whenever you return open parens, that means that you're returning some JSX. If you don't know what JSX is JavaScript that looks very similar to HTML. So for us, what we're going to do is we're going to render something out pretty simple. So we're going to do nav class name. Now this is one of the things about JSX that you can't do. You can't use the word class. And now why is that? Because class is a reserved keyword in React or in JavaScript. So they just substituted class name with class. And don't forget, this is not HTML. Don't forget that. This is JavaScript, hence the necessity to use class name instead of class. Try not to forget that. It's not a huge deal, but it is something you need to know, that you're not actually writing HTML, you're writing JSX. Now for our class names, we're going to want a nav bar inverse, and a BG inverse. Now this is all just, apparently I can't spell inverse. So this is all just Bootstrap, nothing special about it. And we're going to do span class name is equal to navbar brand. And we're just going to do a to do. And we're done with that span. So now that we've got our top nav, we're going to want to render that top nav onto the screen, right? So we're going to go back to our app.js, and we're going to return, right now, we're just going to return top nav. Now, as you can see, I have a squiggly line under here. It's saying I'm missing an import statement. It doesn't know what top nav is unless I import it. So we're going to go up, we're going to do import top nav from .-topnav.js. Now, if you don't know what this means, this is different from requires. Whenever it gets compiled back down to ES or an older version of JavaScript, what it'll do is it'll turn this into a module.exports and imports. But basically, and this will turn this into a require statement. But basically what we've done is we said, hey, we're in this directory, and we want to import top nav. And since this is the default, this object becomes this function. And this function can be rendered as a component. So let's open up our Google Chrome, and look at that. A nice, cool, black nav bar. Pretty cool. So now that we have that, we're just going to wrap it in a div. Now, your question is going to be, well, why are we wrapping it in a div? That's not too smart. Well, the reason is because React can't export, or React can't return JSX unless it's wrapped in a div. Now, you say, well, it returned this just fine. But if I were to add something else, so let's say that I want to do a paragraph, and I want it to say something, right? Well, I can't do that. I mean, it doesn't want me to do that. Why? Because it's not wrapped in a div. If I were to wrap this in a div, not /p, /div. WebStorm, you're trying too hard to be too smart. There we go. Sorry, my WebStorm is trying way too hard to be smart. Now you can see that it worked just fine. So make sure if you're ever doing multiple returning multiple components, you have to wrap them in a div. So for us, we're just going to get that out of the way, and we're going to do a top nav, or wrap our div in our top nav in a div. Excuse me. So next up, we're going to do another div with a class name of container. And why are we going to do that? Because this is just a Bootstrap thing, and it makes it not quite the whole width of the screen. You've seen like Facebook does this, where this part is it's just doesn't have much in it, if anything. That's kind of what container does, is it focuses everything down the middle. So now that we have our div class of container, what do we need to do next? Well, let's render some static data onto the screen and see what it looks like. So let's create a component, and let's call it items body, because this is going to be the body for all of our items, right? So we're going to do items body, and we're going to import React. And this time we're going to import components. Now, I'm having a little foresight here. You should always try and make your components functional components. Why? They're simple. They're easier to break down. So it's easier to deal with them. So whenever you tend to make class components, they tend to be more complex. If you can break one big complex component down into 3 non-complex components, you could theoretically use those non-complex components somewhere else. So you're trying to create the most simple component that you can for the job. So this time we're going to need a class-based component because we're going to need to mess with state. So what state's going to allow us to do is to allow us to mess with things and keep track of that in our state. So next up, we're going to want class items body extends component, open parentheses, and then we're going to export default items body. Now, inside the items body, you're going to need a render method. And this is what's going to render your JSX. And then for now, we're going to return a div with hello inside of it. And then we're going to go back to our app.js, and we're going to render that bad boy onto the screen. So we're going to do items body. And you can see that my WebStorm automatically imported that. So if your IDE/text editor doesn't do that for you, go ahead and do it now. So now we see that we have hello. And as I was saying, container keeps this in the middle of the screen. So we have our hello here. So what do we want? We want kind of just a list of little bars or something that looks, semi-decent, I guess. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another component. Like I said, we want to keep them all as simple as possible. So we're going to make one called list items. So this is going to be a very simple component. We're going to import React from React. We're going to have const list items. We're just going to make this a simple functional component. And then we're going to export default list items. Now, we want to return something simple, just a UL with a class name of list group. Now, what do we want to do here? So what we want is we want to wrap our list items. We want to wrap our list item in list items, right? So this is our container for our items, and we're going to want to put a whole bunch of items in it. Well, how do you want to do that? Well, I would think that it would look good if it works kind of like how a div does, right? So with a div, what do? You have a div, and then you pass in something else. So you have all that, and then you're done with your div, right? So this is what you want. You want the children, right? So that's how we kind of want our list items to work. So we're going to want, we're going to want list. Oh, sorry. We're going to want list item, and then we're going to or list items, and then we're going to want to have like list item, and then we're going to want a couple of these, and then we're going to want to be done with list items, right? So how do you do that? There's something called children, and it comes in on something called props. So props are the things that you pass in. So if we go back and look, let's see if we have. So class name is a prop. So if I wanted to get class name from my list items, I could do class name. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to have a test, and I'm going to go back to items body, and I'm going to render out our new list items. And we're going to have a test is equal to hello world, right? So we're going to console.log our test here. Now, this might be kind of a weird syntax for you, right? You've never seen this. So by convention, you can put props here, right? So this will take the props from here. So we have a props of test, and it's equal to hello world. So we have, props.test is equal to hello world right now. I'm not setting that. Sorry, so props.test is hello world right now. That's what came down. But what you can do is you can do something called destructuring. That's what we did here with component. You can see here we have component. We've destructured component off of the React exports. So we're going to be doing the same thing. We know that props is coming in, so we're just destructuring test and saying, hey, I just want the test object. If you don't understand that, please feel free to ask questions. I'm always available in the comments, and you can email me as well. So we're going to console.log that test, and we are going to refresh our page, see if it loads up. We're going to inspect, and we're going to console. Hey, look at that. We have hello world. So that's what props are. So for list items, we're not going to need props right now. But what we are going to need is children. So by default, the way it works is anything that is wrapped in between two tags is children. So these three list items are children. So what we're going to want to do is just output children. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say list items, and then we're going to just put a P of hello. So let's go look in Chrome, and then we have our hello. Pretty simple, pretty easy. Hopefully it makes logical sense of how this is working. List items child is this paragraph tag, and it closes. So what we do is we come in and we render the props of children that comes in by default just from React, that anything between our two open and close tags is children. So let's clean up this comment. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make something called list item. So this is going to be our singular list item, and it's just going to be rendered onto the screen. So we're going to import React from React, and then we're going to do const list item is equal to function, and then we're going to return li class name is equal to list group item. And then we're going to want some text in here, right? Well, first let's export our list item and make sure it's our default. So now that we've got that, we're going to want some text. So we're going to end up passing in props. So let's just call it text. And then we're just going to render that right out. So what are we going to do? We're going to have a list item, and the text is going to be hello. We must import our list items, or our single list item. So we're going to import list item from /list item. And then we're going to come here, and as you can see, there's kind of it might be difficult for you to see. We'll try and zoom in a little bit if I can remember how to do that on Mac. Well, seems I can't remember how to do that on Mac. Well, I can't remember how to zoom in on Mac. Hold on. Zoom in Chrome Mac. Command plus. Aha. So now you can see that we have this kind of, we have this little square over the top. So that's pretty good. That looks pretty good. Now, I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here because we have built our basic UI. In the next video, we're going to learn how to query our server that we've created and get our data back and then render it onto the screen. So I'll see you guys next time.